All right, let's get started. So, greetings everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. My name is Dr. Amy Sarkowski. I'm the director of the Institute and the clinic. And this Lunch and Learn is sponsored by the clinic, located in Massachusetts' beautiful North Shore on the site of the Children's Center for Communication, Beverly School for the Deaf, lovingly known as CCC-BSD. The clinic provides direct services to children, deaf and hearing, who communicate through American Sign Language, spoken English, and/or with the support of AAC. We also provide support and guidance to families as they support their children who are complex communicators. Finally, we also offer consultations, trainings, and workshops for school districts and organizations that are providing services to learners or young people with a similar population. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you're interested in potentially pursuing services. We look forward to connecting with you. The Lunch and Learn series provides the opportunity to highlight one of our clinicians and their expertise, as well as the kinds of work that we do. These Lunch and Learn sessions are recorded and are available approximately a week after the live presentation and are found on our website. In this presentation, you'll see what that website is. We invite you to peruse the website and to look at any of the presentations that you may have missed. We have 2 more upcoming in May and June, and look forward to having you join us then as well. Today, we're in for a treat. We have, backed by popular demand, we have with us Ms. Adrienne Koenig, who is a speech language pathologist working as a clinician in the clinic, as well as at the school here in Beverly, Massachusetts. Adrienne works in both the CCC and the BSD programs, serving hearing and deaf and hard of hearing children, ages 3 to 21, with a wide range of intellectual and developmental disabilities. She's passionate about empowering complex communicators and developing spontaneous communication in whatever way works best for that child. When she's not working, Adrienne can often be found hiking or swimming in the ocean. But we're fortunate that today she's not doing those things, even though it's a lovely day here in New England. And instead, Adrienne is here to share our knowledge with us. So with that, I will hand it over to Ms. Adrienne Koenig. And thank you all for being here.
All right, hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for coming. Our presentation today is Empowering Communication with AAC, Overcoming Prompt Dependency, and more. So Amy already nicely introduced me. The only thing I was going to add is that my caseload is primarily adolescents and teens who are complex communicators, most of whom are AAC users. So that just gives you a little bit of a frame of reference through some of the examples you'll be hearing today. So before we dive in, I just wanted to pause and ask what brought each of you here today. So you can pop a note in the chat to share if you're a parent or a teacher, an SLP, what brings you here. Great. Looks like we've got a lot of SLPs, teachers of the deaf, parent, AT, SLPAs, lots of SLPs, early intervention, parent. Great, looks like a few different settings too. Well, thank you for coming. So in our session today, these will be the goals that we will be covering. We'll start by discussing our big picture goal with AAC and discussing the difference between learned responses to prompts and language development. From there, we'll do a bit of a review of language development and think about how that relates within our AAC users. And lastly, we'll go over some practice shifts that can help us avoid barriers such as prompt dependency and better support language development in AAC users. So I want to start with this visual. This is from the AAC coach, Kate McLaughlin. If you're not familiar with her, she's a fabulous resource. And the quote is from Gail Porter, who's the creator of Pod. So the goal of AAC is autonomous communication. That's being able to say whatever I want to say to whoever I want to say it to, whenever I want to say it, however I choose to say it. So essentially, this is what you and I do every day as we are going about our lives talking with each other, right? We're not predicting what someone else wants us to say. We are saying whatever thought or idea comes into our mind. And this is what we hope for our AAC users. So I do want to recognize that this can be accomplished in many different ways. Different AAC systems are set up differently. Language might be represented differently. Some AAC users may be using more phrase-based messages and combining those, where some are using words or text. But today's presentation is going to be focusing on word combination through AAC. All right. So here is an example of what autonomous communication and really developing language can look like in an AAC user. We have this lovely picture of one of our students, and here's a few of his spontaneous utterances. He might say something like, "Mom, market basket, turkey. Mookie Betts, Red Sox, play tonight. Excited. Adrian, go, office, leaving." Maybe he's banishing me at the end of our time together. So we see that he's using his words in different ways in different situations and not limited to a finite set of predicted responses. He's not waiting for someone to give him a particular prompt or cue. These are coming from him. However, this doesn't always happen quickly or easily. Sometimes our AAC users hit roadblocks, and these could look like prompt dependence. So maybe we see a child who's looking to an adult as if almost asking what they're supposed to say, difficulties initiating communication, difficulties generalizing. So maybe we see use of the AAC in one setting and not that same use in another. We may see perception of the AAC device as work rather than as a voice. And often when we see these barriers, we see a discrepancy between a structured setting and a natural context. So maybe in a structured setting, the AAC user is composing a sentence. And then in a natural context, we're getting one word, maybe they're having trouble initiating communication at all. It might look pretty different. And maybe we think, oh, this child has difficulty generalizing. They have splinter skills. Before I move on, I just want to ask if any of these challenges sound familiar to any of you. It seems like some of these things are familiar. So some of these challenges can be clues to us that a child has learned to respond to a prompt or they've learned task expectations rather than developing language with their AAC. And these are helpful clues because it may tell us that we can make some shifts to our methods. So today we're going to talk about how to do that. To start, Let's go over a little bit of definition of what is really meant by these two terms of learned response versus language development. So a learned response, that's really referring to what a child perceives is expected of them um, when they're asked a particular question, given a particular prompt, or even just in a particular situation, almost like their perceived right answer. So, a classic example that we see is when a child is asked the question, "How are you?" We often may hear an answer, "Happy," or even, "I feel happy," depending on what has been kind of expected of them in their context. And then, interestingly, we may not also hear the child use the word happy in other contexts. They might not say, "Mom happy," or they might not say other emotions. They might not say tired or mad or really use those words in different ways. We're always hearing it the same way in response to that question. So in our analogy here, we can think of a learned response almost like a set of potted plants, a set of artificial potted plants. So they are discrete, they stand on their own, they're predictable, it's pretty neat, but they don't grow or change into anything else over time. They're separate. So we might have a list of them. I feel happy, I need help, I want blank. It's a set. And in contrast, we are really hoping that we can support language development. So, this is what each of us has experienced if we've gotten to the point that we can communicate with each other fluently. It starts small and incomplete and messy, and over time, it grows. So, we're thinking kind of about planting a seed and helping that grow over time. That's our goal with our AAC users. So here's just another example showing the difference between a learned response or language development. If a child may have the utterance, "I want wiggles," in their kind of repertoire to request wiggles, watching the wiggles. And maybe that's in response to an adult question, "What do you want?" But we may not hear them express other varied messages about the wiggles. We may not hear them combine their words in different ways. So maybe they have that learned response to the question of what do you want is I want blank. I want wiggles. In contrast, the utterances on the right, these are all different word combinations to make different messages. They're flexible and they're coming from the child as opposed to in response to an adult question or prompt. Wiggles fun, wiggles different, wiggles mom me, wiggles later, home. I also want to highlight that on the right, these messages sound a bit more incomplete, maybe shorter, maybe, but also more robust, have some more information. So, how can we help our AAC users shift from learned responses to language development? Well, the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure we understand their communication needs. And a big part of that is understanding which way they are developing language. So, there are two different ways that individuals can develop language. Both are natural and typical, but look different and require different supports. There's analytic language development and gestalt language development. Today's talk does focus on analytic language development, but I want to take a quick moment to introduce both just to make sure everyone is aware, and I'm happy to connect further afterwards if anyone has questions about these. So here are stages of analytic language development, and this is what we think of as kind of traditional when we think of young children learning to talk. They progress from one word to two word combinations to three word combinations. It's pretty linear, usually pretty concrete. We can also think about Gestalt language development. This is a different process where a child does not begin with single words as their unit of meaning. They begin with larger connected chunks of language that they need to break down further and further until they isolate out individual words to then build language back up. So this is something we see in children who use scripting or echolalia, late talkers, non-speaking children who scroll to certain portions of videos, or children who vocalize with rich intonation. So again, today's talk is about analytic language development, but if you would like any additional resources or support in identifying which of these paths your child may be on, please feel free to reach out at the end, as our recommendations would be different. So this is a quote from Marge Blanc, and she says, teaching language outside of a developmental progression fails to lead to developing more language. When we do teach language outside of a developmental progression, we often see those learned responses and that prompt dependency, those kind of discrete responses that may be reliant on a situation or an adult. So with this in mind, we'll do a bit of a review of language development and relate it to AAC. So of course there's variability, great variability across all kids. But what I want to highlight on this slide, looking at just the general progression of language as typically developing analytic language developers start to combine words, is the sheer quantity of words in their vocabulary, that very large vocabulary that they have before they begin to meaningfully put words together, and certainly before they begin to use sentences. It's a lot of words. And what kinds of words do we need? Well, in development, first words are content words. They're based on the child's preferences and experiences. They're people, objects, actions, social routines. And when words start to be put together, our early word combinations, those are content words on the same topic. Semantic relations, so an action and an object, a object and a place. Combining meaning in this way is a crucial stage, because this is where language becomes generative. We take one meaning and another meaning and put them together, and we've made new meaning. So we know those content words develop early, and we really want to make sure our AAC users have a lot of content words, because that's what they're going to need to really be able to follow that typical developmental progression and be able to start meaningfully putting words together. It's also interesting to note that function words, so these are words that have grammatical functions like pronouns, articles, auxiliary verbs, develop later. So it can be tempting to prompt AAC users word by word at the start of a sentence. There's so many resources available, as I'm sure you're familiar with, on the internet for sentence building activities, we often call it, right? Or carrier phrases. And this is starting at the beginning of the sentence. But reviewing development, we know that language doesn't begin at the start of a sentence. And those function words that are at the start of our English sentences develop later. So often when we prompt word combinations starting at the beginning of a sentence, our kids may rely on us to start their message. So prompt dependency can be inadvertently built in there. So, with this in mind, to best support language development in our AAC users, we're going to want to think about and really identify which way are they processing language. Are they an analytic language processor or a Gestalt language processor? And then we are going to want to think about where they are in that process. What kind of stage are they at? And when we do this, we want to make sure that our kind of baseline that we're taking is from their spontaneous expression, not from a structured task. Because as we know, that might look very different. And in the structured task, we might be seeing more learned responses than their true generative developing language. So we're going to think about which way they process language, where they're at, and then we're going to meet them there, wherever that is. Let them lead, and we'll move forward together. So, what are some practical shifts that we can make to avoid prompt dependency and support language development with all of this in mind? Well, we always want to remember that language begins with intent. So an individual must have a thought, an idea, a desire to share something, a need, a want. They must have something, a reason for communicating, right? That's the foundation of all language. And that's the child's intent, not our intent. So, to make sure that we are really building meaningful language on the child's intent, we want to shift from adult led methods to child led methods. What does this mean? An adult led method is typically we're thinking of a situation that was set up by the adult. The adult might initiate the interaction, so they take the first turn of the conversation, and the adult likely has a particular response or message in mind ahead of time that they're expecting the child to say on their AAC device. So, for example, maybe an adult led interaction could be an adult holding up a picture of an apple and pointing to it and saying, "What is this?" And then the child is expected to say apple or I see apple or whatever it is. So this is focusing on the adult's intent, not the child's, and may lead the AAC to be perceived as kind of a work task. It's teaching the kid that they're a responder. A child led method, in contrast, is focusing on the child's intent. So the child is taking the first turn of the interaction and we're following. So maybe they give us one word and then we follow up, we add another. Or maybe they don't give us any words. Maybe they vocalize or look in a direction or point and we model a word accordingly. For the apple example, it wouldn't be the adult presenting the child with a flashcard and asking them, "What is this?" It would be maybe the adult waiting and the child pointing to an apple on the floor or saying apple, and the adult following up, "Yeah, apple, gross, apple floor, apple fell," etc. So in the child-led method, we are mapping that language onto the child's intent, not focusing on the adult's intent. And this is helping to reinforce that the AAC is their voice. It's for communication, it's not for work. Another shift that we can make is shifting from using structured tasks to using natural interactions and play. So, similarly, a structured task could be something like flashcards or picture cards, or even certain structured games. Something like Go Fish could be a structured task. It's a situation where there's kind of a language expectation that's been chosen beforehand, regardless of what the child is showing us. And maybe it's a specific and repetitive language expectation. So if you're targeting prepositions, maybe you have a picture of a dog in the box and the adult says, "Where's the dog?" And the child's expected to say in or dog in box or whatever it is. In contrast, when we target language in natural interactions, we are using the words as they come up. So if we're focusing on in, we're modeling bagel in the lunchbox in the backpack, going in the car, walking into school. So targeting language in a natural interaction and varied interactions, varied context is going to give deeper word meaning. It's going to make language meaningful and generalized from the start rather than teaching kind of that task expectation that sometimes happens with really discrete, structured teaching experiences. We're also going to want to shift from prompting. So this kind of emphasizes that there's a right or wrong answer. And again, is adult led. So this may make the AAC user perceive that my role is to, say something with my AAC that someone else wants me to. And that's not what we want. We want them to say what they want. So we're going to shift away from that to modeling without expectation. And when we're doing that, we're modeling whether it's on their AAC or on a separate AAC, if that's available to us. We are modeling, highlighting keywords while we're talking with them. We're modeling from our point of view and from theirs when we can kind of have a sense of what they mean. And this is showing them that AAC is a voice. It's not something for work. It's not a requirement. It's for them. We're also going to want to shift again away from prompting to recasting. So recasting is when a child expresses something to us and we repeat it back to them in a way that's complete and adds information. So we do this with typically developing children. There's research on it with both typically developing children and children who have disabilities and use AAC. So for example, maybe the child uses one word, wiggles, and they're reaching or gesturing that they want to watch the wiggles. So we can recast, "Oh, you want to watch the wiggles. Okay, yeah, let's watch the wiggles. Let's watch the wiggles now." So we're affirming what they've communicated to us. We're focusing on the meaning and we're just extending it. So to providing them with more language. They're not required to imitate us, but if we get it right, if we recast or model what they mean, they may be more likely to imitate us. Or maybe they'll store that for next time. All right, and now here's another big one. So we can shift from focusing on the form of the message, which could be whether or not it was communicated in a sentence, for example, to focusing on the content of the message. So on the left, we have some kind of examples of adult feedback or adult cues. We might hear, "Tell me in a sentence on your device," or "Great sentence." But those types of feedback don't actually comment on what the AAC user communicated to us. It doesn't comment on the meaning of their message. If we focus on the content, the adult feedback might look like, "Oh, wow." Maybe we ask them more questions about it. "What? Really? Where?" So we're kind of pulling more information from them and recasting, emphasizing what they said. "Yeah, that is a big apple. You're right." So this is again reinforcing that AAC is a voice, and we're also teaching the child here that communicating and using AAC is intrinsically motivating. The interaction itself is motivating and reinforcing. So here's some examples of utterances that could result if we focused on form as compared to if we focus on content. On the left, you see some kind of carrier phrase type messages. So I want cake pop. This is 3 words, 3 hits on the AAC device worth of effort, essentially 1 piece of information, the cake pop. We probably know based on the situation and their body language that they want it. If we focus on content, maybe we let them go first, we do a little recasting, we may end up with an utterance like cake pop, Adrian, later. Again, 3 words, 3 hits worth of effort on the AAC, but 3 pieces of information. We know what they want to eat, who they want to eat it with, and when. Thinking back to development, these are our combinations of content words, which come first before the function words we see in the carrier phrases on the left. I need a break on the left, focusing on form. Again, really only 1 piece of information compared to break, tired, beanbag. Now we know they need a break, we know why, and we know where they want to take it. So why should we make this shift from focusing on form to focusing on content? Well, as we saw in that language development review earlier, content words develop first in our analytic language developers. Those function words that we see at the beginning of our English sentences develop later. So if we require AAC users to start with the function words at the beginning of the sentence, they may rely on us to start their message. That's going to be going outside of the developmental progression. We're going to see some more prompt dependence possibly. And importantly, AAC is really hard work, whether it's stabilizing your body to use your eyes to select on your Toby, or just matching the pace of the busy environment while using AAC. It's hard, and we want to respect efficiency as a sign of competence, really packing meaning into the message rather than a weakness that we need to fix. And I'm not saying that no one will ever communicate in sentences. Just really the focus here is following this progression and making sure we spend enough time on content before we really change our focus to be about form, what we prioritize. So I'm not sure that we have time for a practice example here. But I do want to end kind of looking back on our goal again, that we are prioritizing what the AAC user wants to say, how they want to say it, who they want to say it to. It's their voice, not what we want them to say. And we can make some of these shifts. We can shift from emphasizing correctness to following development. We can shift from structured tasks to natural interactions and play. Again, that could be anything from packing your bag to talking about the Red Sox schedule to asking about your dinner. We want to shift from adult-led methods to child-led methods. We want to shift from focusing on form to focusing on content and meaning. And we want to shift from prompting and requiring language to recasting and modeling without expectation. So I always like to end with this because this has been a lot of information in a short time and we've just kind of scratched the surface of everything. But I hope that it's been a helpful start and given you some thoughts to take with you as you go about your day. So we will open it up for questions, and I will leave the clinic contact information up on the screen. As Amy introduced, we provide therapy, evaluations, consultations, professional development. So please reach out if you have any questions. And yeah, we would love to hear any questions from you now. Thank you all for joining.
Getting some thanks in the chat. Thank you, Adrian. Well done. I will read a question so that we can make sure we capture it and sign. So let's go do that. Question is, I'm wondering about sending this to my ABA team to help explain why I make the recommendations I do.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. I mean, some of these recommendations are obviously different than some recommendations that you might get from someone who's working on a different discipline or a different skill, but I think that's a great idea.
And I will just add that you can send them to the website to take a look. Somebody else asked about, are there handouts available? We actually have the video that will be available in about a week or so. So please direct folks there if that could be of interest. Another question, are you able to share information about Gestalt language development?
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to think of the best way to do that right now. I would say email the clinic at CCCBSD, and I would be thrilled to share some resources with you.
We also did put in the chat, but maybe not everyone was on at that time. You did previously do a presentation on echolalia, and so that might be of interest to folks too. So if you can check out the website and take a look there. And Sarah has included the link again to the full series. Question, how do we get a student to practice target words to learn motor planning in a way that doesn't feel like work?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, picking the target words based on what they're interested in, what are they showing you? So then, if it's something that they're really interested in, obviously that we remember those words develop first, high preference words, and there's going to be more opportunities to communicate about them all day. So obviously it depends on the age of the student, is it play, is it conversation, but making sure that practicing those words is within a communication interaction rather than within kind of a drill activity. That helps.
Is there a certificate? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you have a specific word that you are looking for ideas with, I can give you some ideas, or we could talk out some examples if you'd like.
Perfect. Is there a certificate of attendance for this webinar?
Yes. So yeah, we can, again, if you want to email the clinic at CCCBSD, we can give you that for your CMH hours.
I have a boy using LAMP. He knows his way around it, but he seems to be a naturally quiet person. He loves letters and making words, but that doesn't generate a lot of language. Any suggestions for eliciting language from him?
Great that you see that he loves letters. I mean, maybe some language about letters. Maybe that's your kind of conversation topic. Maybe some of his target words, to go back to the prior question, are letter and love and more and letter names and his name and then the letter and then your name and the letter and where the letters go. Should we play with the letters on the floor? Should we play with the letters on the table? Kind of building in the content words that way. When are we going to do the letters? Now, this afternoon, building in some time concepts that way. Yeah, I would plan around his interest.
Great. Someone said, I've been using core vocab approach. Does it still align with focusing on content versus form?
That's such a great question. I'm glad that you asked. Some of the core words, but maybe not all of them right away. And I think that's kind of a question that people have been exploring in the field. There's a really great article and poster by Emily Lobsher that I could share with you if you'd like to email the clinic at CCCBSD that kind of explores that question. Core word lists are usually generated based on frequency of use of words in the English language rather than by power of those words. Often the lists are generated from children who are beyond 24 months. So if it really depends where the child is, but if they're still kind of getting those early content word combinations, then not all of the core words, some of them for sure, but it depends on the word because those lists are created by frequency rather than power. So you kind of have to be discerning.
When do you point to a specific key saying, oh, I think you want to say, to elicit a response? Should we do this, or is this considered too much prompting?
That's a good question. I think ideally you would model it and say, yeah, oh, I think you want to say, or it looks like you want to say, and you would model and provide the opportunity to imitate. Um, for some kids, depending on their needs and their vision, sometimes I would model it and then be like, give them kind of a practice opportunity. But I do think avoiding the prompt is a good thing to do if you can.
Can you define content words again? I missed it.
Yeah. So content words, that's just meaning, I can even go back to the slide if I can get there quickly enough. So content words are going to be, those are the earlier developing words in typical development. And we're thinking about a lot of nouns, some verbs, some adjectives and prepositions later, but it's, words that have really clear meanings. So people, here we go. First words are content words based on child's preferences and experiences. So people, things, places, actions, something that's really clear and salient, as contrasted to a function word. So that's a grammatical marker, which are, it, the, a, he, she, is, which usually come at the beginning of English sentences and develop later.
Someone indicated, I have found that my toddler learned function words before content words, similar to the core vocab approach.
Interesting. Everyone's different. I think within those categories too, there's probably some difference on, like some core words could be considered a function word, like it is a core word and a function word. Help is also a core word and a content word. Stop is a core word and a content word. Go is a core word and a content word. So there's some crossover in there.
That's really useful. There's a question in the Q&A. How do you model language within AAC using the child's language if the child is developing with Gestalt language?
Really good question. So I'll give you a quick answer and then I'm going to direct you to, on YouTube, actually, Meaningful Speech has a great lunch and learn with Kate McLaughlin, the AAC coach, about this. And that is full of great recommendations. But in short, I mean, it obviously depends on the child. If your AAC user has some of their scripts in their AAC, so if if maybe you've recorded or linked to some of their scripts, you can model those in the device. You can also model using individual words, but model the whole script, or program in new mitigable gestalts for them in the device, and model the whole as well as kind of the mitigations of the gestalt depending where they're at. But that's a really good question and one that folks are working to figure out. Also, AAC GLP Facebook group has great recommendations for you on that.
I'm working with a very happy but passive student. We model on his device all the time, but without prompting, he's very infrequently uses it himself. Do you have any advice for encouraging him without prompting?
It's tricky. I don't know if I have an easy answer. Sometimes like a look, like real, a really expectant look, waiting your expectant face and looking at the device and looking kind of back and forth. It is tricky though. Some kids readily imitate everything we do and some of them don't. And also, even if they don't imitate us in the moment, that doesn't mean they're not taking it in. They might do it on their own time later. So yeah.
Great. Well, I think we've come to the end of our time for today. I do want to mention that if you sign up for one of these Lunch and Learns, then you will continue to receive invites to future Lunch and Learns as well. We're really lucky to have people from a number of countries who've joined us today and really across the US as well. So that's fantastic. Please let your colleagues know that we continue to offer different kinds of topics if those are of interest to you for the Lunch and Learns. And then, as was mentioned a number of times, please contact us at the clinic using our email. Additionally, feel free to check out our socials. You can like us on Facebook and look at the website as well to learn more about what's happening. We are eager to grow this community of folks who are interested in supporting children who are complex communicators. So thank you so much. Thank you to Adrian. I think a collective thank you and good job from all of us who had the opportunity to watch you today. And thank you to all of you who took the time out of your day to join us for today's Lunch and Learn. Hope to see you next month.